and welcome back to the Writer's Hive, where we attempt to demystify the writing and publishing process. As always, we have Julie and Amber, and I'm Caitlin Duncan, and we are here to put another one of our authors in the Writer's Hive honey seat to talk specifically about a recent release of theirs. So we're going to talk about the second book of the In Ash series, A Prophecy in Ash by Julie Zantopoulos. So, Julie, let us know when this book released, where we can find it, and a little more about it.
Fantastic. So it released on October 25th of 2022, and you can find it anywhere books are sold online. However, you can get the ebook directly from my website. You can also get signed and personalized copies of the book through my local indie bookstore, Main Point Books. Everything is linked on my website, on my book pages, but I would prefer, if you have the ability to go through my local indie. They'll call me in. I can sign and personalize it for you. I've loved working with them. That was one of the changes between book one and book two, was being able to work with a bookstore, and it's been phenomenal. You can also seasonally, I think probably quarterly, buy the books physically straight from me, and I will sign, personalize, pretty wrap, and wax seal them for you, so you can keep up to date with that. If you want to sign up for the newsletter, you'll know when those sales open. But yeah, you can kind of get it everywhere. And it is book two of my fantasy romance series. So we are continuing with Ashlyn and Reardon and Brynoch's story. We are continuing in a world where a veil separates the Fae from the human world. Magic has been for years kind of leaking through each side. And you've got people that want the veil down, people that don't want the veil down. We have this magic that's kind of building and tension that's building on each side, and we've got to see where things go. So I think it's a very fun, action-packed, emotional, romantic escalation of book one. Everything kind of ramps up a little bit. We get a whole lot more of relationships that we love, and the world just kind of expands a lot more in book two. So I can't really talk too much without spoilers, but I'm very, very proud of book two.
I wanted to ask, since this is very much a writers-based channel, what challenges did you have while writing this book? And also, what were some of your wins that you had in writing a book two for the first time?
It was stressful because, again, I did kind of debut with a series, and I didn't have series experience. So for me, it was challenging because I wanted to make sure that I was continuing to up the stakes and also focus on my characters and their relationships, which is always a very big focus for me, while also kind of resolving a couple things and introducing or continuing the larger plot. What I realize now that I've finished my original drafts of book three is that I left myself plenty to still wrap up in book three, but it was very important to me to not have a middle book slump or a middle book syndrome. I wanted there to still be enough to engage readers, to continue the world. I tend to like cliffhangers when I'm writing. I don't always love them as a reader, but for some reason, writing them, I get a lot of joy out of doing that. So there were certain things that I wanted to make sure happened in the book, widening of the world and their experiences. And obviously, there were a lot of stakes in book one, so there needed to be continued stakes in book two. And it was a really interesting experience for me to map out exactly where everything happens in a way that isn't too overwhelming for readers. I wanted there to be enough resting periods of either romance or humor to kind of offset some of the darker tone things that were happening, kind of getting the pacing correct so that I was leading the readers through in a way that felt satisfying. It didn't keep them on the edge of, anxiety or nerves too long. It also didn't keep them comfortable for too long. It was all kind of stuff that I I thought about actively while writing the book, while also trying to make sure that I was expanding my descriptions and world, which is something that I have to actively work on each draft. It provided its own unique struggles that I had not experienced before, and a lot of new writers' doubt that I hadn't experienced before. Was I able to carry off a series? Was I going to do this justice? Were the readers going to relate to book 2 the way that they did with book 1? Would they continue with the series? It's a much different beast in a lot of ways, not just drafting it, but marketing it all the way down the line. It was all very new to me, despite being a second published book and understanding the publication process and how I was going to go through the different steps. It was treated a lot differently than a book 1. So there was still a very large learning curve with it that I maybe wasn't exactly anticipating at the start of the process.
So when you first got into writing book 2, or not necessarily even writing, because I know that you wrote the first draft way before it actually, your first book published, but when you had already published the book when you were in the editing phase with your publishers, how different was it looking at their story when you had to think about there was a previous book that you could not change? You were at the stage where you could not change anything that had happened before, and how to fix those things going forward that you wanted you kind of wanted to change, but you couldn't.
Right. I definitely got locked in. I write ahead a lot. So even for book 3, I had already written the large majority of that at the same time I drafted book 2. And then book 2 changed a lot, which changed book 3. Entire POVs no longer existed. It was tough because there were certain parts of my original draft for book 2 that I really, really liked. But from a realistic marketing consumer reader experience, weren't going to work anymore. Having to kind of work within the confines of what I've already established, having sometimes these like plot twists or things that I wished I could do, but I really hadn't thought about it in advance enough to plant seeds in book 1. It really would have come out of nowhere. Like there were things that I was limited in as I continued to go through the second draft of book 2. But I was also very nicely surprised by how much I did kind of come up with, that I was like, ooh, this is a thing that happens. And it was a very late revelation. And I had laid the groundwork for it in prior books, kind of like unknowingly or subconsciously. So it wasn't as difficult as I thought it might be, but it was something that I had to be ever present of. And for the first time, I had to go back and reference book 1 a lot and make sure I was being consistent. I can't count on a developmental editor or a different person to catch all of these things. So I had to go back and double check a name or double check the description of a place. I created a story Bible so that I had all of my descriptions of all of my characters, all of my locations, any house or name or situation that was brought up, creature that was brought up. I had to have that somewhere because I started to go into book 2 and I realized I might be messing stuff up, and I really didn't want to do that. I didn't want to have those inconsistencies. There was a lot of heartache I probably could have saved myself on if I had done that while I was writing book 1, but I kind of did it after the fact because I was like, no, I know my world. It's not going to be a problem. I'm going to be able to figure this out. And that was not the case.
And you mentioned a story Bible. Do you want to describe sort of what that is? And also, what is, 1 or 2 more pieces of advice that you would give a writer who is starting a book series and working on book 2? What sort of advice would you give them?
So for me, and I know it looks different for everybody, some people print them. Mine is just in Scrivener. It's just in a folder in there. But it is a document, a living document of every character. So for my world, I have Fae, I have witches, I have Ravdi, I have humans. I put every character's name and their description. Whatever I've mentioned in the book for them is in their little title, and then I color coded each one by what they were. So if they were human, they had like a peach. If they were Fae, they had green, or witches were pink, whatever it was, so that I can go down the line and I can kind of very easily classify who everybody is. my Fae have familiars. So each familiar was in there, who they were linked to, what their description was, what their animal was, whatever their name. Every creature was in there with a description. And I did locations, very important locations. So whether it was someone's home or a palace or a particular glen or somewhere that's very important to the story, or that they've visited multiple times, or I think they might revisit again, those all got descriptions within there too. So it's people, places, things, and I give as much detail as I can. And then that way, when I go back, this character that I did name because they were important, obviously they come up again later, but they're not a main character and I forgot a name, I'm able to go and reference that. And that was very, very helpful for me, not just in book 2, but in book 3, because there's certain things, especially at the end of a series, that you need to tie up that I haven't maybe touched on as much throughout the series. So like I have to kind of go back a little bit further in my working memory of the story and bring something forward. So having that there was very, very helpful. In terms of advice for writing a series, I'm still finishing this one out. I would say as much as you can, try to map out your main plot points for each story. And then you have some new things that are introduced and some things that are concluded in each story. And then your larger overarching, issue. A lot of my reveals or twists or big moments came at the end of my editing process and did change a decent bit of my stories. So it changed the books forward. And I would say try to have as much grasp as you can on how a book is going to end, and what your world looks like at the end of each novel, so that you can confidently go forward drafting the next one. I caused myself a lot of heartache kind of writing ahead or writing really quickly and fast drafting books 2 and 3 back to back. And then through professional developmental editing and just tightening my story, things changed in book 2 that then completely invalidated a lot of what I had written in book 3. Start your series Bible as early as you possibly can, because it really will help you in the long run, having all that information right there for you.
Yeah, when I was writing my draft, even forgetting people's names and descriptions in the middle of the drafting process happened. And so when I went through my first round of edits, we talked about series Bibles, and I did kind of create a mini one just in my notebook of, as I was going through my first read through, every time a new person was mentioned, I just kind of jotted down their name, who they were, and like their relationships to the other characters. And it helped me in the editing process to know, because a lot of times I would not remember someone's name in drafting. I would put name here and I would just continue on around like brackets so that I could come back to it. And it has helped me. And actually hearing you describe now exactly what you have in it, it makes me want to create a more comprehensive one for my story. So I think everyone should create one, no matter if it's a standalone or a series, because it seems to be like, so far, even the mini one that I have has been super helpful. And if I had done it in the drafting process, and every time I introduce someone, just stop to jot down their name and description, I wouldn't have had so many put name here, name of person, name. I had so many just names, or him, her, like it was ridiculous. But I like that advice. It's really good advice for writers, whether you're a series or not.
One thing that I sort of brought up with all of remembering things, one thing that I do in Scrivener is I'll put all the names on the side as I like create them and then add description. But it's also important to, especially with self-publishing, if you are hiring like your own copy editors and stuff, they tend to create style guides as well. With Her Buried Lives, I actually got a style guide, which I thought was really cool. I know in publishing houses, they sort of keep those in-house, but it's super important, if you are looking to indie publish or write a long series, definitely have some sort of resource, which will make writing a lot easier instead of having to go back and look up all the information.
I will say too that one of the things that really helped, that my original editor did for book 1, was to have the court system and any words that I'd made up in the book. I chose to put them in the beginning of the book just because they would be easy to reference and people could kind of get a gist for it before they started the actual read through. that helped a lot in also reminding people. I got a lot of feedback that helped being there as they went into book 2 to kind of get that reminder. Making sure that I had recapped or touched base in the world that was like the world that was book 2, right? Had changed obviously from book 1, but kind of reminding them what it looked like in book 1. It was, I didn't want to hold a hand. I didn't want to have to lead my readers through this is exactly what happened in book 1, but I did want to give some kind of a recap as to what had happened so that they felt back at home in the world. I think I might have even done a couple of reminders on how to pronounce a name, things like that I think are really helpful too for readers who go into a book 2. I think my second piece of advice would be to maybe not leave too much, like keep track of all of your open storylines. I have a lot of different plots and a lot of different things that were going on throughout the stories. You know, this person is a little suspect. This person's a little suspect. We need to resolve this issue or this issue. And I tended to, in my drafting process, not necessarily know exactly how I wanted those things to wrap up. So I just left them all for book 3, which is not ideal. And I would not suggest that. It does make for a very dynamic, exciting book 3, but it also makes for a much longer book 3 because to wrap up all of those things in a way that doesn't feel forced or too quick and gives justice to each of those storylines means that I have to space them out more throughout the entirety of a novel and still make them make sense. So I would say kind of be aware of all of your different moving parts as much as possible. So in terms of like, not necessarily a story Bible, but here are my open threads. Here's what's still ongoing. And here's what I can maybe resolve in each book so that I'm not left with, 10 things to resolve in book 3. If that's the end of yours, it is the end of mine. But you can resolve maybe 4 of those in book 2 so that you don't have as much going on in book 3. Because each book tends to add something too. So you have to kind of keep in mind that you're probably going to be adding, an issue or 2 in each book. So resolving at least that many is probably a wise choice as well.
You had the first book in the series in a book box, and I've heard that you had the second book in your series in a book box as well. Tell us about the differences between the first time and the second time and what awesome goodies you have.
Yeah, so I was very lucky to have A Curse and Ash in the Unplugged book box for January 2022. And that was phenomenal. That went out to their entire subscriber list, which was amazing for me. It was great exposure and just an all-around fantastic experience. Nobody really knew my book, my world, or anything about my writing abilities. It's usually the way that it goes for series, if you're in a book box, is that you don't go out in the normal everybody subscriber box because there's no guaranteeing that they were still a subscriber a year ago. So in January, I went out with A Curse and Ash, and in October, I did go out with A Prophecy and Ash. And what we ended up doing was working with Melanie, Amber again for my exclusive cover, and we did pre-orders. So anybody who was interested in getting book 2 to match their original book 1 was able to do that. We also ordered and offered for a limited time book 1 again in the exclusive. So if you had missed January's book box, but you still wanted to get that book and have them match, then you were able to do that. We did a very limited run of book 1 again, along with the new run for book 2. So you had the 2 books that matched and went together like tone wise. So this was a pre-order and you were able to get this, a tarot card, and a candle. And having book merch was really awesome. It was like a dream of mine, right? I'll just grab a couple, but I have these really cute, adorable little cauldron-esque candles, and we had 4 different scents. So we had Fairy and Reardon and Brynock and Ashlyn, and each one of them was scented around specific scents that are mentioned in the books in regards to those characters. So that was really cool. And again, it kind of was stress-free in the way that it was just pre-orders. So instead of going out to a whole bunch of people that may not have exactly enjoyed that book, this one was very targeted. It was going out to people who were actively searching for book 2, which was fantastic. We could order exactly how many were ordered. We were actually did a lot of people that wanted the book 1 that hadn't gotten it the first time. So a lot of them were 2 book boxes. Some of them just got the 1 box for the 1 book. But it was a really interesting experience to do it that way and to market a standalone book as opposed to just being a part of the subscription. It was a different approach, but it was really, really nice to be able to work with Unplugged again, and then also Natural Pure Honest for the candles and the scents. They were really great about customizing those.
Did you want to talk at all about how you collaborated with those specific things, cover and the candles? Because anyone who knows you love candles.
I do love candles. So yeah, the cover again was easy, I say, because I didn't have anything to do with it. Amber did. The original books are very bright, so they're a definite different tone than the exclusives. So Amber was able to change over the color of A Curse in Ash to this really gorgeous jeweled navy, and then this cranberry tone for book 2. So we were able to get files that were a little bit more layered for book 2 that made it a little bit easier for Amber, and she was able to manipulate the color on there, which was fantastic. So in terms of a cover change, super easy. Melanie really was happy with whatever we had come up with. So it was just coming up with something that I was satisfied with. And we did play around with the tone and the shading of that one a little bit, but came out with something that I think is very fall appropriate, matches the first book really well. In terms of the candles, I had originally said it was a toss up between an essential oil rollerball or a candle. And I was like, I would love a candle, but I really want to make sure the box stays affordable for everybody. So that was also a giant focus, being able to do media mail for this one, as opposed to like the $15 shipping. We could do like a $5 shipping. Huge, huge difference. And then for the candles, I had said ash is very much like a jasmine kind of a scent. Brynock would be very woodsy, and Reardon would be very much like sea salt and sea air from his home in Ireland. And then the fairy would be citrus and berry, because that's kind of what is explained about all of them throughout their book series. So they ended up actually coming back and saying, why don't we just do all 4? And then people will get kind of whatever they get. It'll be a surprise. They can get whatever, whichever. And I didn't know at all what they were going to do, whether it was going to be 1 or 4. And then they said 4. And I was absolutely thrilled. And then I was able to get all 4 of them. They did send all of them to me, which is phenomenal. And they all smell so good. Like none of them are, I'm very aware of scents, and they can often trigger some headaches for me, but they're all so clean and light and just beautiful. I'll never be able to burn them, but they're so cute. I love that they're in these little like cauldron-y shaped candles, and they're perfect. They're absolutely perfect. And I could not be happier. So an all around great company to work with, and a really fantastic experience. There really was not any stress coinciding with this. I was able to get the book plates all signed and sent out, the tarot cards that I got printed for them all sent out. And then, everybody who got their boxes seemed really, really happy with them. So it was really nice to see book 2 embraced by the people that had originally kind of been cold targeted, because a lot of the people that got the book in the January box were not people that necessarily went out and said, ooh, that's the book for me. But a lot of them really were very open and receptive to it, which was fantastic.
It seems like a great collaboration, and that's always helpful when you're doing something like this, the fact that you got what you wanted.
Yeah.
Any sort of hints for book 3? Do we know anything about it in terms of anything, or when it's coming out, or anything you can tell us?
I have a working title, but I'm not sold on it yet. So I'm not going to share anything in terms of title. I usually do a reveal for that. Obviously, there has been a lot of thoughts about people, have different opinions on what they think the color of book 3 is going to be, or what the background images might be. And I don't know. So I can't tell you if you're right or if you're wrong. But if you have an opinion on what you think you would like to see it, go ahead and let me know. I can tell you it will be the longest of the 3. It's coming in considerably over where the others have been. So I think we're looking at probably an additional 40K over where the other ones were. So we have a lot to wrap up, and I'm going to make sure that it's as satisfying as possible. We are not getting any new POVs. So we do have a lot of action, a lot of romance, a lot of continued building of relationships and expanding of relationships. So I think that the people that are really on board with the relationship that Ash and Reardon and Bri have are going to be very happy with the way that the story progresses. Hopefully they end up and are able to have their little HEA, their happily ever after, right at the end of it all.
What a cliffhanger.
I know.
Well, we're going to leave it at that. Let us know in the comments below what your favorite book 2 of a series is. All right, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.